very specific to when you're looking at scaling and then ultimately selling an agency. That doesn't happen. So my first company a number of years back, it was actually a tech company, and had all the right counseling in the world. Had lawyers that were paying, I was paying $400 or $500 an hour, had high accountants and everything. And without getting into all this esoteric of it, I mean, one single mistake, I learned a couple years later, I could have made extra $400,000 off of cash. And so I don't know where the listeners listener is on your on economic. For most people I talk to, 400,000, it's a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
And so selling a bit, this is the thing that you were talking about, Frankie, is the things you don't know, those are going to be the one that's going to cost you the most. And the thing with selling a business, it's not something we do every day, right? Heck, it's not something we do every year even.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of stuff that's very counterintuitive. And so my goal is to kind of share my journey and the kind of some of the things that we've helped our clients do as well. And my team especially is we focus specifically on digital agencies and tech. And there's a lot of overlap between the two, which I can get into a little bit later. Yeah, so there's very specific to when you're looking at scaling and then ultimately selling an agency. That doesn't happen, say, like, for example, growing a restaurant chain or something like that. There's huge differences between the two.
So I wanted to ask you, I mean, let's start kind of like at the very basics is, I know at different points I've had people say, I want to sell my agency either because they're burnt out, they're ready to cash out. There can be endless number of reasons why they get there. Like what actually makes an agency sellable? Because a lot of agencies don't know this, but they're not sellable as they are. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on just what makes a good criteria, something that can be sold, and what makes something that like needs to be fixed up or kind of polished or whatever. Like what kind of separates the two of those things?
Right. So let me take a step one back. So an agency, one of the reasons as an asset class. Okay. So now we have to think about this. When somebody's looking buying your company, they're thinking as an investor, right? They may be running the business, or they may be adding it to, like a portfolio of companies that they may already have, management team running. Regardless, it's an asset. That's the first thing you got to consider, right? Now, then the question becomes is how valuable that asset is. So one of my mentors said, you could always sell. It just may not be the price you want, right? So now the question is really like, do you want to sell at a price that you want to target? So an agency inherently has more advantages other businesses, mainly because unless you do project-based work, most agencies that we've looked at overwhelmingly have recurring income. That's a very, very big attraction, just the fact you're an agency. Now, if you're one of those agencies that still do project-based work, I would recommend the first thing is figure out a way to get to more a recurring model, right? Again, most of the agencies that we work with, the vast majority of them, 95+% of them already have recurring revenue. But in case you don't, that's probably the first one. The second one is there's different reasons why people buy agencies, right? And it really depends on the profile of the acquirer. We spent a lot of time, talking about the ideal client profile, right? And what I've noticed that nobody really thinks through who's the ideal acquirer.
Yeah.
So I coined a term. This might be a writer downer here. It's the ideal acquirer profile, right? We have ICP, ideal client profile, and what's called ideal acquirer profile. So depending on what the size of the business is, that acquirer. I'm going to use the word acquire versus buyer because the buyer may be the client of the agency. The person is going to acquire the agency. It's going to either be a private buyer or somebody that's in a what we call an institutional buyer, maybe like an investment fund of some form, right?
Yeah.
And they have different reasons, to buy that, right? So like I said, it's a private buyer, they have a different set of reasons. Institutional buyer, they have usually a longer list of reasons why they want to buy it. But really it comes down to, how healthy is the business? Is it trending upward, flat, or declining? Probably, it's worth mentioning. And is that, any business that's at least trending upward, you're going to get a higher multiple. The other one that a lot of folks don't really think through, and this is very counterintuitive, even for people that's already sold a company before, is your retention is actually more important than your net profit. I mean, within reasons, right? Like this business is making $500 a profit a year. This one's making $500,000. Of course, that's kind of extreme. But all else being equal, a company that has high retention is always going to be worth more than one that has low retention. Because if you think it through, right, a buyer, just these two words I want the listener to write down: risk management. That's the number one thing that drives all decisions on what to buy your business. Every decision that they make is going to be based upon that criteria, right? So let's go back to the previous point I made. Why is recurring income, why is recurring revenue important? Well, because then they have a pretty high chance that it's going to happen again next month. So that reduces their risk, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to pay you more versus a company that, so if you have a company here who's doing, say, $200,000 of net profit, right? This one, but it's recurring. This one's doing 200,000, but it's episodic, right? You get a client, they lose them. You get another client, you lose that. Like basically you still get to the same number. This one's still going to be worth more because it's more predictable. So therefore less risk, right? Now, to the point about retention, this is maybe a little bit advanced here, but everything you can to retain that client one more month is going to make your company a lot more desirable. Even if your company is netting less than another one, but you have a long retention, a buyer is going to want that more. Because they can always figure out a way to get more customers, but if you have high churn, meaning you're always losing customers, they're like, man, if we put an additional $500,000 of marketing this thing, but these clients keep leaving as soon as they come in, it's a bottomless pit. It doesn't matter how much money we put in. This thing is just kind of like a bucket with a giant hole at the bottom, right? So the reason I say this is important is because a lot of times we're kind of taught, in a lot of circles, right? It just get the customer, just get the customer.
Yeah.
It's more important to actually get the right customers. And even if you're growing slower, but if you can retain them longer, that's a very, very, very big thing that's overlooked. You and I think we know the same, we try on the same circle, right? Frankie, like Dan Kennedy.
Yeah.
He has a saying, say, when a dollar is a dollar is a dollar, right? That's true operationally. It is not true when you're selling your business. Okay. As I already mentioned, a dollar that appears once is not the same as a dollar is recurring. Likewise, a dollar from a client that's been with you for a year is valued way higher than a dollar from a client that kind of like comes in and out. This has a lot more stability. This is kind of like a revolving door. So this is why there's a lot of stuff that's very count. I mean, things that when you run a business day to day, it makes sense. But from acquired, they're looking at it from a different lens. And that's kind of what I want to help the folks in the community here think through. Like, how does a buyer look at your business? Yes, they're going to look at your accounting, they're going to look at your P&L and everything, but they have a certain lens they look through. They're looking through the lens of someone that's buying the business versus just running the business.
Yeah. Hey guys, if you like this video, you'll probably also like our free Facebook group, Beyond Agency Profits, Agency Lifestyle Design. You can get free copies of the book inside here. I look ridiculous. We're doing weekly Q&As, giving answers to all your questions. Some of the best, smartest, brightest people. We've got lots of industry leaders doing 7, 8 figures and beyond. It's a literal who's who of the brightest agency owners that I know, as well as lots of tips on scaling and stuff, books that work. So if you're not already part of it, you're going to want to be part of it. So make sure to click the link. I put it in the description of the video as well as in the pinned top comment below. So just scroll down and you can join, and it's totally free.